Hi, I'm Chantra Powell, and I'm the Proven Not Perfect podcast host and a best-selling author on Amazon. Do any of these words call out to you? Drive, ambition, doing, leading, creating. These words call many of us, and sometimes to heroic impact. This is all good until we forget about our own self and our own self needs, mainly care. My Village of All-Stars, they not only command position, but they command influence. Well, there's always a backstory. I myself, Chantra Powell, have had to put myself on the sideline a few times, but I'm still in the game. I'm staying in the game. The only thing different about me is that I'm proven not perfect. Enjoy. Hi, Allison.
Hi, friend.
Good to have you here. I'm so excited you're here with Proven Not Perfect.
I'm excited. And for everyone who's watching and not just listening, your microphone changes colors and it's mesmerizing and amazing. Woo! As are you. I love it.
It's my fancy little thing because, hey, here I'm sort of going grassroots, and I don't have the fancy backdrop set that some people do. But I get the feedback to just keep it as it is, not perfect.
It looks amazing.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for this time. So look, I want to jump right in because there's a whole lot for us to cover. First and foremost, Likable Badass. Can we just start with the name of the book that you authored? Likable Badass. Seriously? That even the name right there is a mic drop, right? So how did you come up with the name Likable Badass? Or unorthodox start, but we have to start there.
Oh, well, we should talk about it, but it actually really relates to the kinds of things that are in the book, the things I teach. So I don't know the exact moment I came up with the title, but I knew that I wanted to talk about this really important topic of status for women, being respected and valued. And I also believed, right, that you have to make people curious so that they want to learn more. And that's true about books and it's true about people. Yeah. So I said, the Likable Badass is a reference to a really important concept with the world's most boring name called the interpersonal circumflex of person perception. Who picks up a book with that as the title? Nobody ever.
Can't say it, actually.
Right. It makes so Likable Badass was my way of talking about a really important concept to people who aren't academics, but need to understand what it means, which is, hey, we're always trying to do the same two things. We're trying to show people we care, yes, and we're trying to show people we know what we're doing. And Likable Badass was two words I could put together that when I said it, people got it. And they said, yeah, that's what I'm going for. Even though I didn't have that term, I'm trying to show people I care and I'm trying to show people I know what I'm doing. And again, I think book titles are the same as like the different kind of signals that we give off. We need to make people curious enough to learn more.
I love that. And I think, the fact that you're living the mission of the work, and that is so good, right? I can remember earlier on in my career, there was this thing called the PI model where people talked about performance and image and exposure and all the things. And as I start to dig into Likable Badass, what jumps off the page is that for so long, we may have been pursuing the wrong thing. Power was definitely something that many of us thought was what the Holy Grail was. And you peel that back apart and you bring in a whole new notion of status. So tell us a little bit about this historical viewpoint of power and the concept of status. Let's just lay the playing field there.
Do it. So power is controlling resources that people value. So when you have a resource that somebody else wants, that's normally how when we describe people as having power. So I have a 16-year-old and I said, now that I hold the keys to the car and he has a driver's license, those keys are a resource that he wants. And that resource is a form of power, meaning I'm more influential in that moment. He's more likely to comply and do what I want. So we seek power. Human beings seek control in their own ways. At work, in life, money is a very important resource that gives us control. Other things, authority at work. And we are right to want it. Life is better with it than without it. So there's no shame in saying, I want to control the resources and I should have the resources. That's not a problem. The challenge is that when we tell people to go pursue the resources, lots of people, including women, say, well, no one's giving me the resources.
Yeah.
I'm trying and I'm not getting them. And that is a problem. And this other variable that we don't talk about as much could explain why. And that variable is status. Status is how much other people respect and regard us. So the car keys are something I can hold in my hand. My status, I cannot. My status exists in your brain and everyone else's brain. It's their judgment about me, which seems terrifying and uncontrollable because it's other people's opinions, essentially. But those opinions actually have a fundamental impact on our life. We do seek out to be respected in relationships that matter to us. And when we don't, life is worse. Our physical health suffers, our mental health suffers. So this idea that we could just not care about what people think about us doesn't actually hold true. It matters a great deal to us that we're valued.
It does.
And that is really important in its own right. We see so many people in work contexts, which is, where I spend a lot of time advising people, who say that not feeling valued is the main reason they left their job. It's not because they didn't make enough money or, whatever, they had to relocate. It's because they don't feel like people respect them there. And so it's really important that we feel that just for our own happiness. But the idea of doing it wrong, it's also really important that we're respected as a gateway to get the power we deserve.
Yeah.
Because I always tell people, if you are trying to influence somebody to give you the goal, to say, give me the money, give me the title, give me the promotion, give me whatever, and that person that you are trying to influence in their brain says, I do not value you, you're sunk before you start. There's nothing you can really do. And so by helping people understand and feel like status is something they can really influence, they can't perfectly control it, but they can influence it a lot, it helps them, one, live and work happier, and also makes it a lot easier for them to go get the second thing that they just as much deserve, which is that power. So the ordering matters. I always say if you chase the power and you don't care about the status, you could end up with neither.
That's right.
If you pursue the status, then the power almost gets given to you because people like to put resources in the hands of people they respect. So everything starts to fall into place.
I think that's interesting because, you can also have the alternative thing happen, right? Where someone actually has status, and because they're not very clear on what their offers are and how to position it, they can misunderstand how much influence they actually have. Tell me about that, because I see that a lot in mentoring where folks are just missing the cues, the subtle cues that would inform them that they have a currency that they're not even cashing.
For sure. Yeah. So we can sense it shows up in different kinds of ways, right? Where you can sense that people respect you or don't respect you. Certainly things like, you don't get to present your ideas, you're interrupted, you're sidelined, et cetera. We can feel those kinds of things.
Yes.
But yes, a lot of people can invest a lot in their status, be highly respected, and then feel like they have no influence and they can't call it in. And both of those mistakes are problematic, right? Yes. Not having enough and building it, because it's a resource. It's a resource to live a good life. And so I always say, if you have status and don't use it, it's like hoarding cans of beans in your basement, right? What's the point?
That's right.
And so the way I think about it is people need to invest in their relationships, in their status. They also need to spend it, and they have to think about it like finances, where just because you've saved, you might spend a little bit. So now I have a little bit less, but I'm not broke, and then I could build it back up. And it goes like this throughout our life. My little wave that I'm doing with my hand.
I love that.
And I quoted in the book, but there was a female executive who used to be the general counsel of Pfizer who said, women hoard favors as if they were airline miles. And I laugh because every time I'm going to spend my airline miles, I think like, well, wait a second.
Yes.
What happens if tomorrow?
That is such a great example.
Right? Someone invites me on a round the world trip. I can't spend these miles now. And I just save them. And that idea of you have the status, to your point, you've invested, people respect you. You could use that as a resource to get stuff done. And yet you don't, because you always think, wait, what if I bankrupt myself? Mm-hmm. I need to save this in case I need to stand up for an even bigger issue tomorrow. And her point, Amy Schulman, was that, no, it doesn't work like that, right? Be do the thing, be unafraid to raise your hand, stand up for the thing you believe in, et cetera. And you might spend some of your respect in that moment, but you'll build it back because that's how it is.
That's an abundance versus scarcity mindset too.
Exactly.
And you talk about that in the book. You talk about mindset and how important it is to really check your mindset. Like things like, we all have heard about imposter syndrome, right? But I even like the one that talks about, oh, I'm not a status seeker. I may have said that, right? And I know I've heard other people say that, but am I not? Right?
That's right. Because,
Yeah. So talk about mindset, because I think that's, in this context, it's a really interesting dynamic for women to think about, because some of the very things that we may have been encouraged to discount because it didn't make us, as likable at the tea party, right? Are some of the things that are absolutely the most useful when we're navigating our life and career and status, quite frankly.
That's right. So this was something I observed getting privileged to be talking to lots and lots of really successful women. Is the most capable, caring people I know in the world are women. So they're doing it, they're getting it done. And they're planful. Like I think about myself versus my husband. I got like lists for days and post-it notes, and I've organized the things and everything. And
girl, and you're organizing your list and his. If it's
exactly. Like we are planners, right? Women are planners. They got all the things, except when it comes to status. I see so many people fail to plan. And what I mean by that is they just show up and they start doing some work, and they're working and they're working and they're working and they're happy. And then all of a sudden they lift their head up and they realize that somewhere in their environment, something has gone wrong. They're not getting rewarded, or someone is undermining them or something. And now they're like, uh-oh.
I just had this conversation this week with somebody who obviously will be nameless, but yes, please keep going.
Right? You're like, okay, wait, well, what did I do wrong? I was just sitting here minding my own business, doing good work. And now people are like, oh, now I'm paying attention. Now I've got a problem. Yeah. This person doesn't value me, and that is not good for my life. So I need to go fix that. And what I would say is that's like waking up the day of the trip and being like, oh, we're going somewhere. I should pack my suitcase. Like it's just going to be a mess. So what's amazing is that for all the planning, for all the effort that we are doing, there are really simple things that we're not doing at early stages that could really pay off. To be more planful about status, to say, look, I don't think, I'm not necessarily anticipating the worst, but with a little bit of investment and preparation, I might be able to avoid the worst from ever coming to pass. So for example, if I know that I'm really dependent on certain people for my success, whether that's at work or just in my network of relationships, I should make sure to keep those relationships really strong and make sure that those people really value me. Because in good times and bad, if they value me, it's going to go better for me.
That's right.
And so the easiest time to do that is at the beginning of a relationship when you don't need anything from somebody. Yeah. Because when you're a stranger, that person has not spent very long thinking about you. You can walk in and you could look any particular way, and their non-conscious brain might start to judge you from the instant, because that's what brains do. But that's very overcomeable when you're brand new in a relationship. Yes. You can distinguish yourself very quickly. In a 10-minute conversation, you can stand out. Mm-hmm. And you can get that person thinking, wow, that was really great. I like that person. I'd like to meet them again. And if we start to think about it that way, then when a year goes by, 2 years goes by, 5 years goes, something happens, we've already just invested in these relationships. So the thing I talk a little bit about is, well, why aren't women doing that more? Because it is so easy. It's so easy so much easier to prevent a problem than to solve a problem once someone underestimates you. And I think some of these things you've alluded to are the reasons, right? Imposter syndrome does creep in because it's really hard to be tactical about getting other people to respect you if you don't think you're worthy of it, because you don't really believe in your value.
Right there.
Right?
I think, honestly, you got to say that again for the cheap seats, because I think that so many people start with, no one's listening, I'm not being heard, instead of starting with, what is your superpower? What do you do really well? Why should they listen to you, right? And when you know that, I feel like it gives you an extra sense of confidence to actually show up and play the part.
Yeah. So this is my analogy for imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is not something we get rid of. It's a byproduct of success that we have to learn to live with. And my analogy is sore muscles after a workout. Every single person has exercised or done some physical activity and woken up sore at least one point in their life.
That's right.
Now, when that happens, you're like, oh, I'm sore. It doesn't feel great. You'd rather not be sore, right? Yes. At the same time, you do not rush to the emergency room, nor do you stop working. Okay. Because you say, this is how it goes. You know, you exercise, you get sore. And in some sense, even though you're sore, you actually feel a little bit proud that you did something good for your body. Right. And so you live with it. Imposter syndrome is the same way. It comes from a really good thing. It comes from setting high expectations. Each of us, where we are today, we would have killed to been here 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yes.
But now that we're here, it's not interesting anymore. Now we have our sights set on the next thing. And we keep moving the end line, the goalpost, as we should, because that's how you grow. But every time you move the goalpost, you're looking at a you that you haven't become yet. And you keep feeling like you're not there yet. And you don't realize you'll never be there, because whenever you get there, which you will, all you'll do is move that goal. And so imposter syndrome is always sitting between that gap. I'm here and I want to be this much better. And that's like muscle soreness, which is, I don't like that feeling, but that feeling is part and parcel of the whole thing. There is no ambition without imposter syndrome.
Wow.
And if you don't have ambition, you don't have anything. So we have to start saying, when I feel that way, I'd rather not, but hey, at least I know I'm going for it. Like I'm stretching for things.
I have to say something here, because it's graduation season and we have a lot of young women that are about to go into their corporate journey for the first time. And, you know, one of the things that you hear very well written about is women look for the positions when a promotion is afoot. They look for the ones that they can sort of tick off the list and say, okay, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. And traditionally, men are more apt to say, I can do that job, not checking anything off the list. What you just said, I feel, is a wonderful ruler, even in thinking about how to step into a new role or a promotion or a leadership assignment or whatever that thing is. That's excellent. And certainly for those experienced leaders, right? You just learn to live with it, because what you begin to figure out is everyone's figuring it out.
That's right. That's right. And it just sits there. So I say, I feel that all the time, right? And I think there's two things about it. You learn to live with it, and you do not advertise it. You don't wave it around like a flag, meaning, so I just think there's a place.
There's no truth serum that you just have to okay, I gotta tell you.
Yeah. There's a place for talking about your insecurities, right? But unless you want support or solutions, not everyone needs to know about it. And so one of the things I think about is I have these moments all the time where I feel like an insecurity like that, and I want to confess it to somebody.
Yes.
But I'll pause. I've trained myself to pause and think, in this moment, is this a person who can either solve it or is going to lend me a supportive ear? And a lot of times in most contexts, the answer is no. Not that they wouldn't do those things, but that's not what I need in this moment. So confessing it is doing me no good. And so I think a lot of the self-deprecation we have and these kinds of things are this feeling like we need to confess our inner feelings. And I'm like, you know what? Sometimes you're constipated. You don't need to talk about that either, right? I got all kinds of inner feelings that you don't need to know about. It's just it's not that you would never tell someone that.
Yes.
It has its place, but it doesn't have every place. And I think the same thing with I feel insecure has a place to talk about that, but not with everyone.
So then when we start to bring in this notion of being clear of our strengths and bringing those forward, you have a wonderful little rubric with dimensions that you talk about in the book. Warm, cold, assertive, submissive. And that's a good way to sort of be a gauge for us. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So that relates to the title. So this concept of status, other people respecting us, it's so important and also so deserved, right? I always say, I'm not telling people to be better than they are. I'm telling them to get more credit for the greatness they already have. And so this idea of status is getting credit for the greatness you have. And here's the deal. There's science to this. Every day, each of us, we walk around and we encounter people in the world, people we know, people we're meeting for the first time, people we'll see once and never see again, somebody on social media. And our brains, every interaction, are always updating. What do I think about that person? Right? Oh, I think they're funny. I think they're smart. I think they're mean. I think, updating. And guess what? While we're all doing that, everyone else is doing that to us.
Yeah.
So we're all drawing conclusions about people. But the conclusions we draw about people, it turns out they're not random. We're always trying to evaluate the same two things, which are these dimensions that are in the book. We're always trying to figure out in some way or another, does this person care about people other than themselves? Ideally me, but just anybody other than themselves. We like people who care beyond themselves. And so in psychology, we often talk about that as being warm or cold, being other oriented or self-oriented. And on the cover of the book, that's where I'm using likable as just that catchy term, but it's really, do you care? And once we figure out you care, the second thing I need to figure out is, can I rely on you? Are you good at what you do? So I always say, imagine you're living in cave times and you encounter another cave person. Again, the first thing I need to figure out is, are you coming to kill me and steal my food? Or are you coming to help me hunt?
Yeah.
Next, do you care? Once I realize that you care, the next thing I need to know is, are you a good hunter? Because if you're not, I'm not taking you with me. So that other dimension, I call it badass, or in psychology, we often talk about it as assertiveness, is, are you results oriented? I need to know you care. I need to know you can get something done in whatever domain we're talking about. And if I believe those two things about you, I respect you.
Yeah.
So that's the math. That's the science of respect, which is, if I show up in a way that convinces my audience, that's key, convinces my audience that I care and that I'm very capable, what will happen in their brain? They will respect me. That is a very valuable resource for me. My life will be better because it will be easier to be in a relationship with them. They will be more influenced by me when I do things for me. So that's how it all works, is how do we show up? And what I try to do in the book and with people in general is to say, that's not hard work. You've already done all the hard work.
Yes.
The hard work is being really caring and being really capable. All those investments you already made. The good news and bad news is the difference between you and the most respected version of you is all like little easy stuff of just signaling to people's brains so that they're paying attention to how caring you are and how capable you are. And so that means that it's not a big time consuming effort normally for people to start claiming more respect.
Yeah.
Because it's not about, I need 5 more degrees and I need to be working on this project and this, and all these skills. No, you have those skills. It's about, I haven't communicated them all to everybody in a way that gets them to pay attention.
So it sounds like I know the answer to this. For somebody, they're listening and they're like, man, I've got it all wrong, right? I've misstepped. Can they save themselves in the same environment? Is the question that's on their mind.
Totally. You can. So yes, I get this all the time. Someone says, now you tell me, Allison, but like I'm 5 years into my job or situation and I have a couple people who I just don't think value me all that much. And, I don't think it's my fault, but it's still my problem. I'm still living with it. So what am I supposed to do? Yeah, you can change it. And here's how I tell people. Think about somebody in your life that you didn't have a great opinion of maybe when you first met them. They didn't make a great first impression in them. But eventually over time, they changed your mind and now you think highly of them. I can think of one colleague when I always think about this that really comes to mind. I did not like him. I thought he was really patronizing, really sexist. And in retrospect, I don't think it was any of those things, but the way he was coming across to me, I did not like him. By the time he retired, he's one of my favorite people I'd ever worked with. Wow. We still are in touch today. I am very loyal to him. But here's the thing. That change happens. You can absolutely do it. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
You can't just show up one day and do one nice thing and then think that you're going to undo that person's brain. It's because opinions are very sticky in our brains. They're hard to change, whether that's an opinion about a political party or an opinion about a person's value. Right. They're hard. So you have to stick with it longer. So I would say 2 things to people in this situation. Be patient. If it matters to you, you will be able to change their mind, but it's going to take you longer than you want.
Yeah.
And the second thing is Again, there's like a lot of good fitness analogies here. It's like you can like
I love it. You just went to the gym.
you can
Like,
like gain a
telling
lot
me
of
I need
weight
to
in
go.
one day. You know, you can gain a lot of weight in one day, but you can only lose so much weight in one day. It's like really unfair, right? You're like, wait, I can do all the damage really quickly, but it takes me like months to undo the damage. Like, why can't I undo it as quickly as I did it? That doesn't make any sense. It's the same thing with reputations. The other thing is though, if you're in that situation, is one thing that will really speed it up is using your network, using your allies. This is something I talk about a lot. So if I'm trying to convince you that I'm, more caring or capable than you think I am, it's gonna take a while because you're always gonna be discounting the things I'm saying.
Yeah.
But let's say there's a mutual, trusted, respected connection between us.
Yep.
Somebody who really values me that you also really value.
Mm-hmm.
If I go to that person and I say, hey, I could use your help,
Yeah.
right? I'm misunderstood. I'm undervalued. Can you vouch for me? And if that person really values you, that's not a hard ask. They'll say, I think the world of you. Sure. You want me to spread it around? Happy to do it. Using our allies will speed that process up because when that person says it to you, you're much more willing to listen. You're like, I respect them. And that person likes Allison. Allison may not be as bad as I thought she was. So that can be really a useful tactic for people. And I think we too often try to solve these problems in isolation and forget we have people who are on our side. And I always say, asking somebody who values you to simply tell the truth is a lot easier a favor than asking them to drive you to the airport. So they're going to be really happy that that's what you asked them to do rather than something really difficult, like go sit in traffic for 2 hours.
Look, I'm going to tell you, that is right there is priceless information that you just shared, because the value network and then thinking about it, not in a gamesmanship manner that is negative, but understanding in any situation, if you're trying to get from point A to point B, it is a strategy. You do have to understand the game board and you do have to make calculated choices. And you're saying you're not alone is what I'm hearing.
And I two things I think that would help people if they feel resistant. One is this idea of hoarding the airline miles. To say, look, you have invested in a person who now thinks very highly of you. That person's not an idiot. That person values you because you have value. And why wouldn't you then say to somebody, hey, I need a favor? You wouldn't mind asking somebody if you said, hey, like, I think my pipes are leaking and I'm not home. I'm out of town. Could you go over and turn off the water? You'd be like, hey, I can't do it all by myself. Of course I'm going to call in a favor and I'll help that person out again someday. And it's not that big of a favor. The same is true for these things. So yes, you've invested. It's like hoarding your airline miles. Why would you be a good neighbor your whole life and then never ask anybody to come help you out when it was your turn? So that's the same thing we have to think about is if that person values me, I don't need them to turn off my water, but what I do need them to do is go into that meeting and speak up for me. Mm-hmm. And if I ask them to do it, they'll be much more likely to do it. And then I was going to give you another analogy, and I'm middle-aged, so it escapes. Parenting. Okay, so this is going to help too, right? If anyone's listening that's a parent, this idea of sometimes you're just not the best messenger. When we're parents, we don't dispute this. We think, I always say, I am a professional educator. It is laughable how much of my children's training and education I have outsourced to other people. I don't think I've taught them a single thing. I have not taught them to ride a bike. I have not taught them to swim. I have not even taught them like basic etiquette to put their napkin in their lap. Yeah. Is it because I don't know those things? No, it is because my children will not listen to me. Yeah. If I say it, it's automatically a dumb idea. Now, do I sit in the corner and cry and say my kids don't love me? I say, no. I say, we're just changing the game. You want this high schooler to teach you how to swim? Sold. Go, get in the pool. I don't care. If you'll listen to them instead of me, that makes me smart and efficient. That does not make me a bad mom or a bad influencer. So I think about this when we change the context to work or our adult relationships, it's the same thing. Knowing that I am not going to be the best person to convince you and bringing in someone else instead who's going to get the job done does not make me a failure. Nope. It makes me smart at understanding human behavior. And so when we don't hesitate to do it in our parenting life, we shouldn't hesitate to do it in the rest of our lives because that's how it works. Change the messenger, change the impact of the message.
Man, wow. That's so good. I think about when you go into the boardroom for any meeting, and there are inevitably those things that any of us are doing that without even knowing, it's not helping us out. What are some of the things that you've observed and heard in your conversations that you're like, these are the three things that unless you check yourself, it's highly likely that you might be demeaning the very thing that you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah. So I talk about when we are in these situations, it's often we are putting information out into the world. So we are presenting ourselves in ways that are sending off cues about how caring and how capable we are. And there's definitely ways in which we fail to show up as caring, like easy misses. But I think particularly for women, there's more often than not we fail to show up as capable. We get criticized for that piece of it because that's the one. Caring feels very natural, right? Showing up as really capable starts to feel a little scary.
Yep.
And I think the two big categories are going to be withholding our successes.
Mm.
So not showcasing things that would get us credit for being capable, and also advertising our failures. So both of those are challenges. So as an example, I all kinds of things, like I talk about this a lot. I for years was very hesitant to talk about the fact that I have a PhD. Yeah. Because I felt like it just made me sound kind of elitist and snobby, but I do have a PhD.
Yeah.
And I started to realize when I was speaking in audiences, for example, that I was, for a very long time, I was younger than my audiences. And that's not true anymore, but I might still look younger than my audiences. But nevertheless, I realized when you're standing on a stage and you have a distracted audience who has all these things in their life to worry about, I've got about 10 seconds to convince you that I'm going to say something interesting and that you're going to be excited to hear me. Yes. And if I don't talk about who I am or what my credentials are in any way, shape, or form, it's really easy for me to lose you. That's right. So I might have to talk about something, even if I don't really like saying it, because I might know that it's the quickest way to say, oh, Allison actually has some evidence here. Mm-hmm. So if I can say I'm a professor and an organizational psychologist, and I can work it in my intro, people might say, oh, you know what you're talking about. In the same way that if someone was giving you medical advice and you'd be like, yeah, stop. But then they happen to mention that they're a doctor. You're like, oh, well, that would have been good information to know before I was listening to what I thought was your bogus medical advice. But now I actually know you know what you're talking about, right? So that's an example. Like we have to talk about our not just our qualifications, our education, and stuff like that, but just our successes, because people don't know about them. And especially now that the world with tech plus post-COVID, we are working so detached and disconnected that people they never did, but they certainly don't now have full visibility into what you're doing.
It's right on.
Someone said to me the other day in an event, they said, I just want my work to speak for itself. And I said, okay, well, let me take me as an example. I said, I'm sure you're good at what you do. I'm just meeting you tonight. I have no damn clue what you do. Your work could never speak for itself with me. We don't work together. I will never know your capabilities unless you tell me. But I might be a person you want in your network. You have no choice but to showcase. So talking about these things. And here's the crazy part about this is that we think that when we keep good stuff to ourselves, that people think we're humble. We think we're winning on the caring dimension. Yeah. But there's science on this. And when I read it, I'm like, oh my God, it makes so much sense. And it totally contradicts the way we've been behaving. So let's say you and I are interacting and I have something I could tell you and I don't tell you. Yeah. And then you find out about it tomorrow because the grapevine's efficient, right? Yeah. What goes through your head? Do you think, oh my goodness, Allison, I was just talking to her and she didn't tell me what a humble person she is? Nope. No one thinks that. Yeah. Right? People think, why didn't you tell me? Yeah. Why didn't you? Either are we not close? So I didn't get to be in the circle of people who knew about these things. So now I feel like there's distance between us. Yeah. Or even worse, you think, did she not tell me because she thinks I'm not capable of being happy for her? That I'm so petty and pathetic and envious that I couldn't do it? And what she must think of me. And so the research actually shows when we don't talk about ourselves, we don't celebrate ourselves, it actually is the worst of all worlds. Yeah. No one knows how capable we are. And it actually drives a wedge in the relationship. We're not even seen as very caring. And I thought, what a mistake when you could go the opposite. So finding those ways to talk about that, that's one. And then the other would be the voluntarily cutting ourselves down, which can be either sometimes imposter syndrome. Sometimes it can just be humility, Like, oh, if I'm going to self-deprecate so that you don't think I'm like, so great. I know that I'm humble, et
I
cetera.
see
I'll
that
cut
a
myself.
lot where women
Yeah.
sort of say, I know that I'm not the smartest person in the room, but
Yeah. And I always think about, I always say to people when that happens, what are you trying to achieve
that's
there?
where you are.
Because you could achieve the same thing in a different way. So sometimes we cut ourselves down to be funny. Self-deprecation is a form of humor. Being funny is actually a really good thing. It's very relationship building, and funny is smart. So when people are really funny, we actually respect it. But there's other ways to be funny. So
Yeah.
that's one thing I had to learn about myself was I was using it as humor, and humor is good, but there's other forms of humor. So when I started doing it, when I would realize I'm trying to kind of crack a joke,
Yeah.
and then I would think, is there another joke I could crack?
Yeah.
Sometimes we are self-deprecate because we're trying to say to another person, I think you're great and I think you're amazing. But then I think, is there another way we could do that? And I would say, yeah, just do that. You're great. You're amazing. I don't have to use myself as the dumber, less capable one. I could just say, right? I'm so happy like to have your expertise and your wisdom right now. I totally value it. Super caring, super kind. Don't have to say anything about me.
Okay.
So when you have that voice in your head that wants to cut yourself down, if you can take a beat and say, what is my goal here? The goal is probably valid, but the tactic could probably be tweaked. Like, I want to acknowledge your greatness. I want to be funny. I want to be humble.
Yeah, I think that's good, in particular for female executives, in male dominated boardrooms as well, right? Because you are different. There is an acknowledgement that you're different, and your very presence speaks louder than you even opening your mouth, right? And so then layer in there a minority woman, and then you're screaming already just from walking in the room. So so some of the decisions to self-deprecate or all the strategies that we just talked about have been intentional. But I think what you're saying that's really important for us to hear is the trade-off in that status is so critical as currency that you don't want to misunderstand that you can give something up and lose position, right? And that happens so easily. And then now the next thing you know, somebody's talking over you, or your idea is not heard until the next person says it.
That's right. And so here's what I always say to people.
Yeah.
I am fine with
Love
anything.
this talk, by the way.
You do. I could talk to you. I can talk to you all day long. So you're just gonna have to tell me when you had enough. I tell people I'm okay with anything as long as you choose it consciously.
Yeah.
Right? You get to be you. You don't have to be one way. You can do whatever you want. But what I see for a lot of people, and I'm going to give you an example from my own life, is I always say, if you don't know you're doing it, then you can't be choosing it. And you could be doing a lot of things that you think are great, but they're not. So self-deprecation is something that for me has always been part of my style. And I knew the research that it wasn't a great idea. And I would try to like moderate it and cut it back. And I thought I'd done a pretty decent job.
Yeah.
And then when I wrote the book, and sent it to my editor, I wrote the whole thing, sent it to the editor. And despite the fact that she had purchased this and paid me to write it and believed in it, she did not know me well. We met literally once. She bought the book. And then I go into a coffee shop and write it. And then I deliver the book. So this is not a person who I have a real strong relationship at this point.
Yeah.
The biggest piece of feedback that comes back after that first round was, oh my goodness, Allison, look how much you are cutting yourself down.
Ooh.
Like people buy books to read them from experts, which you are, but you cannot talk about yourself in this self-deprecating way because these people don't know you and they are not going to see your expertise if you're cutting yourself down.
Wow.
And right now, here's the beauty of this. So this is why I say this is for people. If she articulated that beautifully, very clearly, and it was in writing. So like, here it is on page 73 with a red circle around it. And because of that, I could see it on paper. It was not in dispute. I was like, yep, there's like 83 instances where I cut myself down. But most people do not have my job.
That's right.
If you were doing this, how would that happen? It would happen in an email, in a meeting, in a hallway conversation, in a presentation, and you would be dropping these things verbally over time, one by one.
Yes.
And then lo and behold, someone says, you just don't seem like you have a lot of like presence or gravitas or, leadership material. And you would be outraged and you would think, how dare you?
Mm-hmm.
And the person giving you the feedback is not a psychologist nor a book editor. So they don't have the language to be able to
Yes.
say, one
Oh,
thing I know,
Allison, this is so good.
right, is you're always cutting yourself down. And here you're getting this really global feedback that feels super biased and unfair. But what that person is telling you is, I see something, I can't label what I'm seeing, but I'm seeing it. And here's the thing, they're not wrong. You're actually doing
You
something, but you
are.
have no idea you're doing it. And so what I say is, if we can turn just some attention to how we're showing up, and then we get to decide,
Yeah.
we get to choose, but you can't. So now, the more aware I've become of my self-deprecation, the more it becomes a choice, not a bad habit. So I might still choose to say, I'm rolling with it, either because I'm too tired to censor.
Yeah.
I think it actually might meet my goals.
Yeah.
I don't really care. I mean, there's reasons you could do it, but now it's a choice. And so what I would say to somebody who feels like they've constantly felt like they've had to edit themselves to be in spaces to say, I keep getting feedback that like, I'm not doing the right thing. Some of that is bias. It just is. Okay. And some of it is also that over time, we might be picking up a lot of habits that we think are serving us.
Yes.
And maybe there's a different way, and the person doesn't have any way to like talk about it. So I always say you can be annoyed and curious at the same time. You
Whew.
could say, it's really unfair of you to judge me that way. And also, I want to know why and figure it out, because I need to figure out if you're just a biased jerk that I should avoid at all costs, or if maybe I'm doing something so simple that's not even a part of my identity.
Yeah.
There's a lot of parts of me I hold dear. My self-deprecation was not one of them. I'm happy to ditch it.
Yes.
It was, it's not a thing that I really care about. I just didn't know I was doing it. And so that's where sometimes we've learned these behaviors, we've picked them up,
Yeah.
we've adopted them, but we
And they
haven't
worked. They must have
and they-
worked for us at some point in time, because we
correct.
couldn't do it otherwise.
Correct. That's why I say people aren't idiots. They have a good logic.
That's right.
That just sometimes the logic either overplayed or it doesn't work in this environment or things have changed. I don't have the same role I used to. It evolves. So I think we just kind of stay curious and conscious about both ourselves and the feedback we're getting. And then think about, this is the other thing I will say is my day job is to be an experimentalist. Like to be a psychologist is to run tests and be like, does this work? Does this work? And that's actually been really helpful in the way that I approach my life, which is nothing's forever. You just change a variable and you see what happens.
I love that.
And I'm just going to see this variable, change this variable. And like, it might not work, but guess what? Like, that's not my whole life in that instant. I can recover, I can move on. And so I think of these things as like little tiny experiments of you want to self-deprecate less. I'm not telling you you can never say anything bad about yourself again, but maybe just for this one meeting,
Yep.
you'd try to just like redirect that negative thought and try something else and just see how it lands. And a lot of these things that I've practiced that I'm better at doing now, I got there just by doing that. Let me just one time try this. And I realized, oh yeah, complimenting you feels a lot more fun than cutting myself down. And so let me go with more compliments and less cuts to myself, and that comes over time.
I think that you've also pointed out something that is really important as someone who is driven and also aware of others and their responses. In a 360 experience, you're receiving feedback oftentimes for people who have little snippets of the picture. And I hadn't really thought about that until we just had this conversation. So if it's little snippets of the picture, there are aspects of it that definitely you take to heart and you consider and you reflect upon. And there are other aspects that when you try it on, it feels either out of context or driven by something environmental that perhaps you controlled less. And I think that's important because, a lot of this maintaining our focus on the right things as we pursue, continued promotion in our career is maintaining that confidence and anything that's kind of pulling from that. It's almost like that boat with the little hole in it, right? If you're not shoring it up, we can pour all the goodness in it, but you're nicking it at the bottom.
For sure. And I mean, I'll flip it a little bit to say, life is just nothing but 360 feedback.
There you go.
Whether or not you've ever gotten a 360 survey, anyone in this world gets to think anything about you they want. The peers, the subordinates, the superior, anyone does. Life is 360 feedback. And guess what? Here's the thing. Yes, most people don't have the whole story. And that means their feedback has to be evaluated in that context. But the other thing I would say is, why don't we give them the full story?
Ooh.
Because if I thought about that, if I could tell my full story to everybody in that 360 circle, I wonder what they'd think.
Yes.
And so that is how I would start to think about this, is that at some point, everyone
soon as you get that inkling that says, you know what, right now, this conversation is informing me that perhaps you don't have all the pieces of the story about me. And now it's my responsibility, maybe not in that moment, but certainly strategically making it a priority in the future. Man, wow.
Exactly. And so, and to know that no one will have the full story unless I start giving it to them. So and giving it to them before I recognize they don't have it. Like, don't wait for someone in life to fill out the form and give you a bunch of 3s before you say, oh, maybe you didn't understand. You didn't have the full story. Don't let them get to that point where they're filling out the form. Before they fill out the form, say, here's how amazing I am. That's like the metaphor for life, which is, before their brain has decided you're like a middle of the road 3, let them know that.
Anchor them.
Yeah, anchor them. And I mean, I saw this in like ways in my life that just blew my mind. So I've been a professor for over 20 years.
Which is not an easy beat, by the way. Like,
no, our job is to make it look easy. No one's job is easy, but it's amazing in some ways and like soul crushing in others, like everyone's job. But what was amazing was I would do a lot of professional development and speaking. And then sometimes people would come to me. This is crazy. After I would speak to an event, like at my university, people would come up to me and say, do you speak like, outside of here? Could I ever bring you to my company and have you speak? And I thought, wait a second. I've been speaking for 20 years and I've just spoken to you. And now you are still not sure whether or not I would be available to speak. So what it taught me was, wait a second. I did not tell my story very well.
Wow.
Because if that wasn't obvious to you and you're not an idiot, what it means is that even in an audience where you think surely they know, surely it is obvious, it was not obvious. And so then I started doing things like talking about the fact like, oh, well, last week when I was at such and such organization speaking, and I would turn it into a relevant point, but I would make sure to drop the fact that I was over there because it was a subtle way to say, oh, Allison speaks in other places. I was like, oh, I have to make this known. I would start posting about things I did on social media because people would see them and be like, oh, Allison speaks. So I realized if I wanted people to know that was part of my identity, even when it was not that far from what I was actually doing as my day job. And so I had to tell them. I had to tell them explicitly and repeatedly and in multiple ways. And that was a good lesson for me of realizing, people aren't paying attention to you. They have no idea like your full capabilities and what you do. They're worried about their own lives. And so you have to say, this is what I do. But, and for anyone out there that is very resistant to this, I'll say this and I'll pause, is you're talking about yourself is, it is self-promotion since it's beneficial to you, but it is not just about the self. People cannot come to you for help if they have no idea what you are good at. And so when you talk about your skills, you are also opening it up for people to say, hey, I would like to learn.
How can I partner with Allison?
And if they don't know anything you're good at, people will never seek you out for help. And no one wants that. I mean, that makes people sad to think that no one would come to them, but how would they know what to come to you for? And so when you talk about the things that you have, not just like an accomplishment, but just skills, like, hey, I always tell people, like, for example, one of the things I really like to do is I love brainstorming about other people's businesses, particularly female entrepreneurs that have small businesses. I just love the creativity and the brainstorming.
Okay, we are going to talk after this about that love that you have, because that bumps against a passion that I have around women businesses, women leadership. And I am convinced that there's an opportunity to create a space of incubation that brings all sorts of new thinking in softer ways that help them to excel in getting the money that's out there, that help them to excel in acquiring the talent that's out. So that's a whole nother side conversation.
Okay, we're on it. So this
apparently we're accountable because the entire world hears this.
But see, here's my example. The example was you would have never said that to me if I didn't say to you,
Fair.
Hey, here's something that I like. And so when we do that, then all of a sudden your brain is like, oh, Allison might actually be interested in helping me with that, which might not have occurred to you otherwise. And so that's a good example of when we talk about ourselves, we also invite other people to say, oh, wait, you could be helpful. And it's how it all grows and how the community gets created.
How about that? Wow. Look, we could keep going, but I do want to respect that you are just off a flight and probably wanting to recapture life here. But I do want to ask you a question because I just want to. So inbox, are you an inbox zero person at the end of the day, or is it just out of control?
I'm such an inbox zero person to the point that I find it hard to breathe if my inbox is not.
I find most of my driven ladies, it's something that we desperately want to do. Whether we accomplish it, no, but desperately want to do. And some people accomplish it. Sounds like you're one of them.
Well, I'm not quite there yet, but I feel like it's just like I always feel like I'm one day away from it, and I just keep going like that. But I will tell you, something happened to me twice actually.
What?
There was I realized what happened. It was my own mistake, but I accidentally twice deleted my own in my whole inbox and put it in the deleted items folder.
What?
Now, yes. It was like I was doing something on the computer and it highlighted. I was trying to delete a single message, but it accidentally highlighted the whole inbox and I hit delete and it put it all. Now, even though I go to inbox zero, I don't empty my trash at the end of every day. My trash sits there until they tell me it's full, right? So the trash had 50,000, 100,000 messages. So now what has happened? 17 messages have got dumped into 100,000, but I don't know what the 17 are because those are 17 that I haven't really dealt with yet. So the first time it happened, I tried to painstakingly with tweezers pull the 17 out. Okay. Second time it happened, I was like in tears and I'm like, you know what? I give up. I forget. I just let them all go. Guess what? Here's the deal. Nothing happened to me. I am still here. Are there 17 people out in the world who hate me and think I never responded? Maybe, but nothing has bubbled up in a way that I feel like there's a real consequence. So I would say to somebody, if you just don't think you can get a fresh start, delete the whole damn thing and just start over.
That's right. I love that.
It was an unforced experiment. But when I did it, I'm like, why am I not just deleting these things all the time?
So I'm going to share this one. I do this. If you're out of office for an extended period of times, which can sometimes be just 24 hours, I create a folder for everything, all 100 of them, plop it in that folder, and then start the day as if I was never out of office. And over time, I'll go back to that or not at all. What I find is that if it's important, it will come back up to the top.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that. Yeah. That's so smart. That's really good. So you're not overwhelmed of, oh my God, I have to go through these 400 emails.
Can't be.
Yeah, you can't do it.
I haven't done anything. It's over there, but yeah. So look, I want to thank you so very much for being generous in this book, Likable Badass, How Women Get the Success They Deserve. This is an amazing book. You can see it. I've got all the tabs because I think you have so many strategies in here that we couldn't possibly touch in this conversation. You have tools in here. You have stories in here. I loved reading about Stacy. I loved reading about Kate. I'm just putting that out there because that makes the girlies and the guys that are listening to this, they want to know who Stacy and Kate are. Get the book, read the book. And then I know that you're still out there on stages and in other conversations talking about this book as well. What's the next one? What are you tackling next? I know this cannot be the end.
It's not going to be the end, and I'm not holding back from you. Although if I had something, I might have to hold back, but in this case I don't. So I don't have to lie or, be cagey.
Yeah.
I don't have anything. I always joke that I am not J.K. Rowling. I was not born with a 7-book series in my head. I'm thinking about a couple of different things. And the only thing I'll say about it is that a good piece of advice I was given was when you write a book and you pour so much into it and you really love it and you love the process and you want to do it again, you have to make sure you love the second idea as much as the first because you live with these things for a really long time and you have to put it's 9 months past the book's launch. It is 5 years since the day that I wrote the proposal, and it is still every single day of my life is talking about it. So you have to do something you love so much that you want to talk about for 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
And if you do something you don't love enough, you end up with like buyer's remorse. So I am thinking about it. I'm getting to the point where I would like to start thinking about it more actively. So come back to me.
Awesome.
Invite me back. I might have a different answer.
Hey, you're stuck with me. I already told you that. I have about 5 ideas just from other calls and this one too. So thank you again. We, the collective we, the big loud we that are listening to this, taking notes, listening to it twice, reading the book twice, taking notes. We appreciate you and thank you for making it plain. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.